The debt I thought would save use. The first time I saw the letter, my hands trembled. It was from the bank, a cold, printed warning that our home, the only place I had ever known comfort, was about to be repossessed. My family had racked up debts we couldn't pay, and unless someone did something, the house would be gone within weeks. I sat at the kitchen table that night, staring at the numbers, at the impossible weight of it all. My parents whispered in the other room, my brother pacing with restless energy, my sister pretending to scroll through her phone, but I could see her eyes glassy with fear. They all looked to me, the eldest, the one who always had to fix things. I didn't hesitate. I had worked years to save a little money, scraping together every shift, every side job, every coin I could. That money was meant for my future, my escape from this crumbling house, maybe even a chance at building a life of my own. But as I listened to their hushed arguments and saw the desperation in their eyes, I made the choice. The very next morning, I went to the bank. I signed away everything I had saved. The emergency fund, the investments, the security blanket I'd clung to since I was old enough to understand poverty. It was just enough to cover the debt. The house would be safe. When I walked back through the front door, I expected relief. Gratitude maybe. My family greeted me with smiles, hugs, even tears of joy. "You saved us," my mother whispered, clutching my face in her hands. My brother clapped me on the back, promising he would pay me back one day. My sister squeezed my hand so tight it hurt. That night, I went to bed exhausted but lighthearted. For the first time in months, I believed things would be okay. I believed I had done the right thing. But by morning everything changed. I woke up to silence. The usual clatter of my mother making breakfast, the sound of my father's footsteps, my brother's loud music, all of it was gone. The house was too quiet, eerily so. I walked into the living room, and that's when I saw it. A folded note on the coffee table, with my name scrawled in hurried ink. My hands shook as I opened it. Chua. We had to do what was best for us. Don't come looking. The house is sold. Family. My chest tightened. The words blurred in front of my eyes. I rushed to the front door, only to see a Zelda sign hammered into the lawn. The driveway was empty. Their cars, gone. The rooms, stripped bare of their belongings. They hadn't just left me. They had sold the very house I sacrificed everything to protect. My savings were gone. My family was gone. And I was left standing in the ruins of my own sacrifice, betrayed in a way I couldn't yet comprehend. But betrayal, I would soon learn, can be the most dangerous kind of fuel. The note was only the beginning. I stood frozen in the living room, staring at the note as if it could somehow explain the impossible. My family hadn't just abandoned me, they had robbed me. Every penny I'd worked for, every sacrifice I'd made, was gone in a single night. I read the note again, my eyes tracing the words. We had to do what was best for us. Don't come looking. The house is sold. A best for them. Not for me. Not for the one who had given up everything to save them. My hands shook, not with grief this time but with rage. I searched the house room by room. Their closets, empty. The safe in my father's study, cleaned out. Even my brother's old guitar, the one he swore he'd never part with, was gone. They had stripped the house down to bones, leaving me with nothing but walls that no longer belonged to us. By afternoon, strangers arrived. A real estate agent, smiling coldly, told me I had until the end of the day to leave. The papers were signed yesterday, she explained, as if she were reading the weather report. The sale closed this morning. It's not your home anymore. I felt the ground vanish beneath me. Yesterday. That meant while I was at the bank, covering their debt, they were already arranging to sell the house. My so-called family hadn't just betrayed me overnight. They had planned this, they knew. I packed what little I had, a few clothes, some books, a photograph or two. As I carried the box down the driveway, I saw something glinting in the trash can. A crumpled contract. I pulled it out, smoothed the papers, and my stomach dropped. The sale price. It was nearly double what I had paid the bank. Not only had they taken my money, but they had also made a profit. A fortune compared to what we had. And they left me with nothing. For 2 nights, I slept in my car, the contract folded in my jacket pocket like a burning secret. I replayed every moment in my head, my mother's tears of gratitude, my brother's empty promises, my sister's tight grip on my hand, lies, all of it. On the 3rd morning I decided I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to beg or plead or hope they came back. No, if they thought I would vanish quietly, they were wrong. I started with the bank. 1 visit, 1 question: who signed the sale papers? The clerk hesitated, but I pushed. Finally, she leaned closer and whispered, "It was your father. And your brother. They signed everything." So it was them. The 2 people who should have protected me the most. My own blood. But the betrayal went deeper. The clerk's eyes darted around, then back to me. "I shouldn't tell you this," she murmured. "But the buyer, it wasn't a stranger. It was arranged privately, cash, fast, no records through the main office." I leaned in, my heart pounding. "Who was the buyer?" She hesitated, then whispered a name that turned my blood to ice. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't random. It was someone I knew. Someone close. And that was when I realized. The note they left me wasn't just a goodbye. It was a warning. A game they thought I'd never have the courage to play. They were wrong. The buyer in the shadows. The name the bank clerk whispered hit me like a blow to the chest. It wasn't some faceless investor. It wasn't a stranger with deep pockets. It was my uncle. My father's own brother. The same man who had eaten at our table every holiday, who always preached about family loyalty, who'd promised me once that he'd help me through school if I ever needed it. Uncle Tariq. My mind reeled. He wasn't even subtle. A cash deal, rushed paperwork, and a sale that went through almost the same day I emptied my life savings. He had been waiting like a vulture for the right moment. And my family handed him the perfect opportunity. I wanted answers, I wanted to know why, so I went to him. His house, bigger and colder than ours had ever been, loomed like a fortress. I knocked until the door opened. He stood there in a silk robe, sipping coffee, as if my entire world hadn't just burned to the ground. "Niece," he said smoothly, as though nothing had happened. "I was wondering when you'd show up." "Where are they?" I demanded, my voice cracked with fury. "Where's my family?" He smirked. "On their way out of the country, I imagine. Your father said something about a new start. Somewhere warm. Somewhere far away." My stomach turned. They hadn't just abandoned me. They had run. Taken the money, taken the house and run. "And you," I spat. "You bought it. You helped them?" His eyes glittered. "Helped? No, child. I did business. Your father came to me desperate. I made him an offer. He took it. That's all." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Don't be naive. Family is just another kind of currency. They traded you for a better life. And I came out richer." The words cut deeper than any knife. My own blood had bartered me away like I was nothing. I left his mansion that night, but something inside me had shifted. I wasn't broken anymore. I wasn't lost. I was burning. I spent weeks digging. Every scrap of information I could find about Tariq, about my father's rushed deal, about where the money had gone. I tracked phone calls, bank transfers, emails. What I uncovered made me sick. Offshore accounts, shell companies, property bought in secret. It wasn't just betrayal, it was corruption. And my family wasn't innocent pawns. They were complicit. They had helped cover Tariq's tracks in exchange for their escape plan. That was when the pieces came together. They hadn't abandoned me because they didn't care. They abandoned me because I wasn't part of their scheme. I was the sacrifice. The one they could cut loose. But here's the mistake they made. They thought betrayal would break me. It didn't. It forged me. I began planning, slowly, carefully. Revenge wasn't about screaming or fighting. It was about patience. About precision. About making sure that when the knife twisted, it cut exactly where it hurt most. And I knew where to start. Tariq might have money, but he had enemies too. Business partners who whispered about his greed. Associates who resented how much he took. All it took was a few conversations, a few anonymous tips, and those whispers became louder. I didn't stop there. I leaked documents, sent evidence to the right people. Quietly, piece by piece, I started dismantling his empire. But revenge is never clean. It always demands something more. And mine wasn't finished yet. Because if Tariq thought I was dangerous, he hadn't seen what I was saving for my family. Cliffhanger, page 4c. The final act of betrayal. The final act of betrayal. By the time I struck the match, everything had been set. Months of quiet work, late nights sifting through bank leaks, whispered calls to investigative reporters, anonymous tips to a prosecutor who hated corruption, had turned into a slow, burning fuse. I'd learned to be invisible and patient. The reckoning I wanted had to be surgical, public and irreversible. The plan was simple on paper and fiendishly complicated in reality. I fed the journalist the dossier I'd assembled, forged signatures, back-dated contracts, wire transfers into shell companies that led, like a trail of dead leaves, straight to Tariq. I included copies of the documents my family had signed, their hurried initials, and the voicemail my father had left Tariq the night before the sale. The one in which he begged for cash and promised silence. I buried the evidence in plain sight and then waited for the right moment. That moment came at Tariq's charity gala. A 200-person spectacle where he loved to wear his wealth like armor. He would be there, smiling for cameras, announcing new investments, basking in admiration. It was the perfect stage for a fall. I bought a ticket under a fake name and entered the grand hall like a ghost. Crystal chandeliers spilled light across tuxedos and expensive dresses. Tariq stood on a raised dais, speaking about family values, philanthropy, the sanctity of home. I felt bile rise in my throat. He spoke of loyalty while my life lay in ruins because of him. The prosecutor and 2 officers arrived quietly, suits deliberate as they threaded through the crowd. The journalist posted a thread that spread like wildfire: key documents, screenshots, a short video of my father's voicemail. Phones lifted like a sea of witnesses. Tariq's smile didn't falter at first, then the room shifted. A collective intake of breath. He tried to laugh it off, to call it a smear, but the prosecutor stepped forward and read the charges: fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. Flashbulbs exploded. People who had toasted him an hour before now whispered and pointed. Tariq's face folded, then hardened. He barked that it was a vendetta, a setup. His cronies crowded him, murmuring threats. My family stood near the back, faces flushed with panic. My mother's hand over her mouth, my brother's jaw clenched, my sister staring as if trying to will things back to how they were. They had come, I realized, not to defend him but to watch the collapse they had helped build. As officers led Tariq away, he caught my eye for a heartbeat. There was anger there, but also something else. Fear and a sliver of regret. You'll lose everything, he spat. You'll be alone. He was wrong. I had already lost everything. The difference was, I'd taken something back. After the arrest, the chain reaction was swift. The buyer's cash account was frozen. The sale was declared under investigation. Lawyers dug into the signatures and found enough irregularities to void the contract. The bank apologized in a sterile letter. They had followed paperwork, they said, but mistakes had been made. My family's offshore accounts were scrutinized, their passports flagged. My father, when approached, chose to flee rather than face questions. My mother broke down and begged forgiveness. My brother vanished. I got the house back through legal knots that felt like a second war. It wasn't immediate, it took hearings, affidavits, the testimony of the journalist who had risked her career to print the truth. When the judge finally signed the order that returned the deed to my name, I stood on the front steps and listened to the wind move through the trees. The house was ours again, on paper. A victory, small and enormous all at once. But reclaiming the walls didn't mend everything. The photographs on the mantel were hollow now. The laughter I remembered sounded like someone else's memory. My family had chosen a cheap escape and left me to pay for it. Some wounds are not for bandages. I stood in the empty living room and found the crumpled note they'd left me months before. I unfolded it slowly. The ink faded at the crease. For a long time I just held it, feeling the paper map the shape of my anger and my loss. Then I walked to the front door, unlocked it, and left the key on the kitchen counter. I could have stayed and rebuilt, called them back, tried to stitch the family back together. But revenge had taught me a different lesson. Justice could be neat, but healing was a separate, quieter labor. I wanted to start a life that wasn't built on betrayal or bargains. So I locked the door behind me and walked away. The house stood like a monument to everything that had been taken and everything I had reclaimed. In my pocket, there was still a small envelope. The balance of the sale, frozen by the court, eventually returned to me. It was enough to rent a small apartment, to buy new books, to begin again. As I moved through the city that night, the note burning a memory in my mind, I didn't feel victorious so much as resolute. Revenge had closed one door, it had opened another. And outside, beneath a sky that had already forgiven the stars, I felt something else take root, a steadier kind of strength, the kind that doesn't need to be witnessed to be real. The last line of the crumpled note read, "We had to do what was best for us." I smiled then, a small, cold smile. "So did I," I whispered and kept walking.